What's going on, fellas? It's the last good man in Jersey, here with a message to help you win. We are going to do an episode on divorce today. I didn't really understand how divorce worked in America when I went through mine, and there were a lot of things that I'm glad I found out, but really wish I knew at the start. Could have saved me a little bit of a headache. Um, If you hear the music in the background, which is a little bit different for me, shout out to my nephew at Fibonacci for allowing me to use some of his music in my show. I'm going to experiment with that. Uh, so click like, click subscribe, and let's get into an episode where we talk about divorce and some of the things that you might not know as a guy who's never been through it, but that you might really benefit from understanding, especially if you've never been married and you're thinking about the kind of person who you'd wife up. I got married mid 30s, met my ex on eHarmony. We were two people who basically both wanted to have kids. We were at a point in our life where that was a big focus. Didn't really think much beyond that. Professionally, we seemed, similar, education, similar, all that stuff. Fundamentally, we were people who wanted to have kids. Now, we had a daughter. I didn't have more. Long story there. Let's just say that having kids, mid to late 30s is not as easy as it is when you're in your 20s and your early 30s. Um, but for us, fundamentally, we weren't really on the same page anymore because we had the kid that we had kind of built our plan around. And now we were two people who were trying to figure out how to live together, how to coexist. Ultimately, we wanted very different things. I told her to move out of my house, more on that later, so that she could take a minute to think about sort of what she wanted. She filed for a divorce, and we ultimately ended up divorced and co parenting our 10-year-old. Pretty common story of parents getting divorced, having a kid or kids who are bouncing between parents' households, and all of that. That's a setup of the divorce. Here are the things that I want to start to talk about, though, and it's sort of specifically how divorce works. Things I didn't know, things you may not know. Um, this is not a conversation that is going to make divorce more fun, but it is something that may help you to think about divorce and not necessarily lose as much as you might be thinking you're going to lose. It can also help you to really understand some things that I found to be much more important for me to understand about anybody else who I would ever consider marrying. Okay. I told my wife at the time that I wanted her to move out because I was getting very frustrated with our living situation. Essentially, I thought, I'm paying most of the bills, I'm doing most of the heavy lifting, and it feels like I'm also listening to a lot of complaining that um, didn't make a lot of sense to me because my perspective was, if I'm doing most of the hard work, I'm going to make most of the decisions. And if you want to be a decision maker, step up and help. We disagreed on that. And when I told my ex to move out, she filed for divorce within a week of me telling her. And we went through a long process of getting divorced. Felt long, but talking to other people, it's kind of normal. 2 years. That seems to be pretty typical. Here's the thing that happened and that was interesting. Now, at the start of the divorce, I had this very outdated view of what divorce looks like. I thought I'm going to get every other weekend. I'm going to have to pay out a lot of money up front. I'll have to deal with alimony. I'll have to deal with child support. Just tons and tons and tons of problems for me. I assumed, guys get screwed in divorce. That's my understanding. When my parents got divorced and I was young, my dad got very little visitation. And ultimately, he moved back to where his family was. So we didn't see each other for a while. And I did not want to be stuck in a situation like that. I made an offer to my ex, here's kind of some upfront money. Here's a visitation schedule I would like to have. Here's what an ongoing kind of alimony child support situation could look like. Basically, I was trying to preempt the courts so that I could, see my child for, more time than I thought the courts might allow for, which basically meant every other weekend during the school year. And then I wanted extra time in the summer to make up for, all of the time during the school year that I wasn't going to get. Now, my ex, this is an interesting point, my ex also had the same outdated view of how divorce works. So she also thought dads get every other weekend, alimony, child support, etc., etc. So she looked at my deal and thought, ha, kick rocks. I'm going after more. Okay, that was her mistake. When she rejected the deal, I realized that I really had nothing to lose. Why not pay a lawyer, big bucks to fight for more? I don't like the deal that I'm putting in front of my kid, that I'm putting in front of my ex because of how little time I have with my kid. So, why settle? Things to note. Number one, what I found out in my case, courts like for dads to be involved in their kids' lives. I didn't know that. I was thinking that I was going to get every other weekend and be stuck with that. That was a starting point. That was kind of the, if this is all you want, okay. But you're entitled to 50-50 co-parenting. It's like, what? I didn't know that. You mean I can see my kid half the time? Like, yeah. You are one of the parents. 50-50. Shocked me. Shocked my ex. I won't spend a lot of time on fundamentally parent a primary residence, but basically my attitude was, I want my kid as much time as possible. I'm not giving up any of my rights to my kid, any ownership, any of that. My kid is going to spend time with her dad, and that's non-negotiable. That started me down this interesting path of just what can I get. Other things to note. My ex and I had very similar salaries. So when it came to alimony, non-issue. I wasn't making, a mountain of cash more than her. So she wasn't entitled to any lifestyle adjustment. Like, you know what? He's going to go live his life. You're going to go live your life. And I should back up a second. Child support. I have my kid 50% of the time. My ex has my kid 50% of the time. There is no child support. I spend my money taking care of her when she's with me. My ex spends her money taking care of my kid when she's with her. We make some adjustments, practical adjustments, like, hey, you carry her on your insurance, I'll send you some money for that, basic stuff like that. But that's it. You buy your kid food, you buy your kid clothes, you take care of your kid 50% of the time, and you spend your money on you and your kid and not your ex. And I know, guys, the thing we hate, the thing that we really despise is the thought that we're handing money to our ex that they're blowing on stupid stuff, not on our kid, and we're stuck. That's not necessarily the case. Now, couple of things that were interesting. One, something I was very glad I didn't do. One, something I wish I'd known about and changed. Okay, now my house. I thought, ooh, my ex will get my house. But here's the deal. I bought my house before I ever met my ex. She moved into my house. She never got on the lease, never put her on the lease. Thank goodness. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm just giving you my personal opinion here. If you own that house, do not put your wife on it. Don't do that. That's a dumb move. Um, that was my house that I bought with my money and that I was entitled to. She helped with some of the mortgage while we were both living in it, but she helped with the mortgage while she was living in it, which essentially made that rent. That's not something that you owe her. Like, she benefited from those, she benefited from living there. So, okay, I don't have this massive expense associated with my house that I moved her into. Good. Now this thing is starting to look fair. The one thing that was a little bit of a trick, and this is a strong, definitely think about this, listen to this next piece because it's important. Bills and payments. I did what I'm guessing a lot of guys in my situation would do. Yeah, I had a bank account. I had a house. I paid my bills, direct deposit out of my account. When my ex moved in, basically I continued to pay for our bills out of my account because that's what I was used to. So, I was still making the same old house payment I always had been. I put her on my car insurance, so I was still paying my car insurance out of my account the way I always had been. I ran into this issue of what's called commingling. Here's essentially how it works, and it's very tricky because as guys, the way we think, we can easily fall into this trap. You're paying your house out of your bank account. You're paying your bills out of your bank account. Your wife comes in. That's not just your bank. When you start paying joint bills out of that account, that's a joint account now. You're commingling funds. Funds are coming in and you're using them to pay family expenses. So the account changes. Even though your wife's name isn't on the account, you're covering her expenses and yours, which can make that a joint account. This was something I experienced. The advice here, so that you avoid that account becoming, shared funds, becoming up for grabs, is if I was going to get married again, I would be very clear. I'm going to have my personal account. She's going to have her personal account, and we're going to have a joint account that we use to pay bills. That joint account, fine. All the bills would come out of that, and I would manage how much money went into that so that it was really just designed to pay bills. My account, she would have zero access to. That's my money, not getting touched, not going to any shared expenses at all. Avoid all of that. Keeps your money clean. I had a very good lawyer, so he was able to help me untangle that. Essentially, I didn't lose a lot of my money and a lot of my assets and my time with my kid to my ex. I paid a bunch of money to my lawyer to protect me, but this was 5 years ago? When I think about what that money that I spent got me, time with my kid, my house protected, my assets fundamentally protected, yeah, that was well worth the expense. You'll hate it in the moment. Oh my gosh. Divorce is not cheap in America. You will hate paying that money up front, but several years down the line, when you've got a great relationship with your kid, when you can look back on in your phone on all these pictures you've got with your kid in her fireman's hat or at her Easter egg hunt or at, all these events that happen over their lives, you're going to think, yeah, that money bought me this. It bought me this relationship. It bought me these experiences. That was worth it. So divorce, divorce it freaks us out. It's not getting married to a woman that's scary. It's her divorcing us that's scary, because of what we can lose, and the expectation being that we're going to lose the most. Situations can be different. If you're making significantly more than your ex, okay, your situation's a little different. If you don't have the flexibility to see your kids or to have your kids 50% of the time, situation's a little different. But what I'm helping you to understand are some situations and some things to think about, so that you can protect yourself from what could be a catastrophe down the road. No. One thing that I'll say about remarriage, given where I've been, what I've seen, what I know now, because a lot of people get married and they kind of, it's the same story. Hey, I didn't really know what I was looking for when I got married the first time. I have a better sense now. Okay. Here's my I've got a better sense now story. If I was going to get married again, I'd be looking for two things out of a spouse. Two things that are non-negotiable. And if I don't see these, there's no way I would marry anyone if I don't see both. Okay. First thing is mission. What I mean by that is I would have to marry someone who shared my vision for whatever it is our mission was. And by mission, I mean some long-term goal that you need each other to accomplish. Like, I want to dance at my granddaughter's wedding. I want to see my grandson, graduate college. I want to see something happen in my life that can't happen until I'm old, and that I need you for, and that you also want to see in your life. I need something that I know will bind us, because the worst thing you want to do is marry someone for happiness. Like, oh, I want to be happy. That is the worst reason to get married. Why? Marriage is not always happy. Absolutely, positively is not always happy. You hope that the person you're with makes you happy more so than not, but you're going to have hard times. Sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with them. Or sometimes they're on your side, but there are problems that are bigger than both of you. And it's still miserable. And it can stress you out. If the goal is happiness and she's not happy, she can leave. Now, I'm saying she's not happy, she can leave. I'm not saying us, because, the statistics show men don't file for divorce. We may do some things. We may want to, separate for a minute, take some time to kind of reassess, or, basically to try to get our spouse to see that they aren't contributing as much as we are, and we want more help and not just a lot of complaining. But fundamentally, women are the ones who give up on relationships. They're the ones who give up on marriages. So you don't want a goal that's as frivolous as happy. Because what happens when she's not happy? She can bounce. What happens when she's not as happy as she had been? Or when someone else can make her happier than you? You're out. I don't want anyone who wants to get married, and when you ask them, well, what are you hoping to get out of a marriage? Like, what do you want to accomplish by being married? Oh, I just want to be happy. Like, No, 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 no. That's someone who can leave you pretty easily when things get rough because they were clear. Their goal is happiness. They're not happy right now. So why do they need you? Okay. So the first thing is a shared, the mission, our vision for what we want out of our lives has to be the same. We have to be on the same page about that. I have to really be able to buy into believing that this is a person who's going to help me accomplish that. They're not just going to give up if things get a little rough. Second thing is loyalty. That stickiness that you kind of see in someone that helps you to understand that even when things are bad, they're in it for the long term. Now, this ties to the mission, but it's a little bit different. You can have a mission of, wanting to dance at your granddaughter's wedding. Your spouse could have a vision of wanting to dance at your granddaughter's wedding. They don't necessarily need you for that. They might decide, don't want you. I'll go find someone else and I'll pursue that, I'll continue to pursue that goal. I'll just do it with someone I find more interesting. I need some sign that here's someone who's in it for the long term. And a lot of that comes with time, with evaluation, with being with someone who you've built a relationship with, who you've built a bond with, and seeing what happens to that bond when there's a bump in the road. So when I meet women who are in a hurry to get married, this is fundamentally the issue I have with them. I don't know, and I doubt that they have loyalty because they haven't demonstrated it. It's not to say that they, maybe they are loyal, but I don't know that because I just met them. And what I'm seeing tells me they're in a hurry to get married. They don't seem to have put much thought into who they're marrying. They could be in a hurry to get divorced and might not put much thought into that either. And that is not what I want. It's less about wanting to get married than it is about not wanting to get divorced. And I have never seen, ever, someone who right off the bat is in a hurry to get married and is very clear about their intent to find a husband. I've never seen someone who wants that and who can explain, who even tries to explain why you can believe that they're loyal. That doesn't factor into the equation. It's just, I want. I want a ring. I want a wedding. I want a kid. Want. It's like, well, what happens when you don't get what you want? Do you bounce? What happens when you get everything that you want? Do you bounce? I need stickiness and understanding that, yes, you're going to be there in the long term. So all of this is to say, divorce sucks. Call it what it is. You do lose in divorce. I'd much rather have my kid 100% of the time than 50% of the time. But 50% of the time is way better than every other weekend. As an aside on scheduling, something for guys who may be going through divorce, or if you ever find yourself in this situation, two popular schedules I see right now. There's the one that I'm on, which is kind of a straight 50-50 split. I've got 2.5 days each week and every other weekend. Works. It's what we started with. Didn't know any better. Seemed to make sense. I've seen a lot of divorcees now who have 1 week on, 1 week off. If I could go back and do it again or negotiate a different sort of schedule, I would much rather have 1 week on, 1 week off. It just makes it easier to plan as you start to think about your life and some of the things you want to do when you've got the flexibility of knowing the week that you're free to travel or to, have guests over or whatever it might be. It's just a little bit easier. So those are some things to think about. Fundamentally, the broad idea here is divorce. There are things you probably didn't know. Hopefully this sheds some light on some of the things that you can get out of a divorce that you didn't realize, and also helps you to understand kind of some of the risks and some of the watch outs when you're looking at relationships and spouses and potentially thinking about jumping the bridge.